Hey, folks, welcome to another episode of Jove Talks, episode number 2. Thank you so much for tuning in, logging on, and stepping in on our Discord, and for RSVPing, folks. Um, I didn't plan on having a second episode. I thought it was just going to be one and done, but we got some good responses last time, and I had a couple of ideas about bringing in some more folks to talk about other aspects of wormhole life, namely evictions. Evictions are a part of wormhole life, whether we like it or not. It's whether we love it or not. But a lot of people have suffered through one, and a lot of people have had the pleasure of evicting others. So I thought I would invite folks like Crizwoo, Braxxus, Adra, and Sin to come talk about their perspectives of evictions. These are some names that have been involved in a lot of evictions through the many months and years that wormholes have existed. So, with that, I just want to go over a couple of things. I know a lot of people have strong feelings about evictions, and but I just want to make sure that everyone understands that we're all just human beings who play Eve as a video game, and this is a leisure activity for us. A lot of folks who are going to be talking here, just like everyone else, have real lives, families, and careers, and this is what they do with the free time that they have. And Eve is a great PvP game where PvP is not consensual. Same thing with evictions. Sometimes they're not consensual. Actually, they're never consensual. Um, but I wanted to bring experts who have that subject matter expertise to be able to discuss this and give some insight to the rest of us as well. And I think these folks are really, really good at it. And the reason why I wanted to do this is because I really miss Vegas. I went there in 2018. I saw all of these terrific speakers who were talking about various aspects of wormhole life or null life or different aspects of Eve. And just wanted to bring that out in COVID times so that folks can still have some sort of platform where they can talk in depth about their knowledge, and so that we all can benefit from it. So with that, let me just turn it over to Sin Alarma, who is going to talk about his part of this presentation, which is called Why You Have No Hope Against Us. Take it away, Sin.
I'm holding on the edge of my seat. That's okay. Can I like kind of start talking while you do your thing? Yeah, sure. So, g'day, ladies and gentlemen. So, Sin, I was kind of hesitant initially when I was asked if I wanted to present here, and that's because I guess I've probably been involved in more wormhole defenses than I've been involved in evictions, and I would honestly say that every other person that's presenting, certainly I have either gone to defend against or during our evictions have had them come and defend against us. So whilst certainly the opening remarks are, we are people that have predominantly been involved in evictions, I would say a lot of our experiences are based on both sides from a defense and eviction point of view. So yeah, I've got the edgy title of Why You Have No Hope Against Us, and it'll become clear what I want to talk about. But I would say that the most disappointing thing I've seen either evicting someone or assisting in the defense against an eviction is the lack of preparation or, I guess, state of readiness that some groups can be in. And I thought I'd use my very small amount of time to provide something that you can challenge or question after 5-6 minutes of me talking on why I think some groups might not necessarily be in a favorable position when the time comes. So if my presentation's ready to go, Tiberius, I'll kick on. Oh, so good. Cool. So as I said, edgy subject title, but really what I want to talk about is a couple of things, and I sort of sketched this down and sort of reverse engineered the title from it. There's a sweet quote down the bottom there, which will stay throughout the presentation. And the way I want to do it is talk in, I guess, like a Simon Sinek sort of way, which is the always start with why concept. So I'll definitely talk about the what and the why, but I might not necessarily talk about the how, because I think in a lot of cases, as the game changes, the meta changes, or your groups are different, the how is very much up to you. And also, to be fair, you don't want to give away all the sweet tips and tricks that might aid or abet you in an eviction. So essentially, what I want to do is pull Hope and Us down, make an acronym, and just use them as a linchpin. They're certainly not everything, but they're good places to, I guess, pivot the initial presentation to allow some of the more experienced guys to talk some of their experiences as we go. So number one is whole control. Often people do not realize the options they have in either taking whole control over an enduring period or a short period. Whole control, if you imagine that your whole or your system itself is like an isolated, I don't know, outpost or castle, and there's only so many ways in this, valleys or bridges or whatever. Your static or statics and any wandering holes that might come in to you are absolutely vital terrain, if you like, in any eviction. And if you don't have a concept of how you are going to take it for a short period of time to get allies in, to get reinforcements in, or those pilots that aren't in the hole when it happens, you can probably put yourself at a significant disadvantage during the eviction. There are a bunch of ways you can do it, but I think a lot of groups just assume that they will just wait for their timers and just allow whole control to go to one side or the other. And that's a really important piece. The next bit I want to talk to is offensive in nature. And when I talk about this, it's just getting out there with your group and doing PvP, winning, losing, all that sort of stuff, and understanding your doctrines. If you wait until it's time and the eviction comes to actually try and form a fleet and work together, be it with your allies or even in your own group, it's really difficult on the day, as you're tired, as you're stressed, to do that. So naturally, I would say that groups that tend to be, I guess, offensive in the way they interact in the Eve community tend to be in a better position when the time comes to actually do it. And at the end of the day, like, that's the whole point of having any PvP ships in your hull, right? Like, you should actually be in a position where you're going to use them. You should expect to lose fights. You should expect to win some, but certainly things like offensive supply chains, so knowing how you're going to get more stuff into your hull, who is going to be a logi anchor, who's going to be a tackle, and allowing people to think. Because if you lump it all on one person and you haven't developed those offensive tactics, you'll find you're in a really, really difficult position as that person gets more and more tired or their life starts mounting up in those 4 days. So certainly something to look at. For me, it's people and politics. So not only is it having your people in your hole prepared with the right doctrine ships and the like, but it's also knowing who you're likely to reach out to at a time of eviction, and maybe you already have developed relations with them. Maybe you've been on an op with them, you've been on a roam in nullsec, or you've done some rage rolling together, or you've been to the defense or an eviction of another hole. Often when groups try to slam together to work, there's lots of friction, be it at the leadership level or even at the membership level. And I can tell you that comms is stressful when two groups haven't worked together much before, because as those cultures sort of try and work together to iron it out, it puts you at a disadvantage when you're actually trying to do either the offensive or the defensive sort of pieces there. And finally, it's the exit strategy. So not only is it an excellent name for a corporation, good plug, but what I'm talking about is if you can't win, if you can't get whole control, if whatever it is you've done to prepare doesn't work, what have you told yourself as a corporation? What have you told your members? And what have your members done to prepare themselves for whatever it is they're going to do? And I think being really upfront with your group well before an eviction on, hey, if you lose everything, this is what we're SRPing or whatever, will iron out a lot of the friction and tension that comes during those 4 days that an eviction is. Because if you haven't been upfront and people have far too much stuff in their hole, stress can really build up. People become really selfish, and that's when you see people doing really bizarre things, particularly on the second and third day of an eviction. And I would also say to this bit here, if you're going to sit on the undock of your structure and SD things for 2 days straight, which we see in many different cases, maybe you shouldn't have had that stuff in the hole in the first place. Is probably something I would certainly vouch for. On the flip side, generally, if those first four things are things that I tend not to see groups in a position to do or be prepared for, what I certainly see is groups that are unprepared. So they don't have things to hand out to the allies that they're going to bat phone. They maybe don't have even the fits for the ships. So many times you see capital ships that just don't have fits or the like. And generally just a state of, at any particular time, they're not in a particular position to defend their hull. And I guess if you remember, was it a month, maybe 2 months ago, whenever we did the last one of these, I spoke about finding the perfect hole. If you're going to find the perfect hole, like, awesome, but maybe look at what it is you're going to do when someone else decides that that's also the perfect hole and want to take it off you. Now, I ummed and ahed over S for the longest time. I was going to talk about being a sore loser. I was going to talk about self-destructing ships. But what I've gone with is submissive, because I think it's a really good way to close out the presentation and sort of allow people to challenge back or ask questions. If you're the sort of group that when people come in, you're going to roll over, expect that to then follow on with you. If you're going to be the sort of group that, I guess, shit talks in local and talks about how bad it is, it's great. It's great salt, and it keeps everyone really entertained for sure. But just know that whatever it is, particularly in Eve, which is a long and enduring game, however you act during those 4 days will tend to follow you for probably a fairly long period of time. Now, if I could end with the quote, which is down the bottom there, which is just, some business guy, but I thought it really fit with what I sort of wanted to talk about, is a lot of the wormhole meta in an eviction revolves around luck. But as the quote says down there, unless you've actually prepared for the opportunity that arises, you're going to end up with bad luck. When that frig hole spawns, or your allies roll into you, or some group that you do have relations with manages to connect, if you're not in a position to do something about that, or your allies show a particular period of weakness with a time zone or the like, all you're going to get is bad luck. That opportunity will pass and you'll be gone. So if you want a better chance, certainly some preparation for those opportunities that might arise is certainly the best thing you've got. So that's my closing, I guess, thoughts. Happy to take questions and challenges. And the idea of this presentation, as I said, is not to be a be-all, end-all. It is just to open up the discussions for today and certainly allow people to challenge back.
Thank you very much, Sin. Really appreciate that. Candid and straightforward. We already have a couple of questions streaming in. I'm going to go ahead and ask you the first one. Rogue from Wormhole Society wants to know, what are some ways to survive an eviction during the aftermath as a corporation, lessons to learn, etc., especially if you lose and you get evicted?
So let's assume that the eviction's successful, so you're without a home. I would say a lot of it, unfortunately, as a lot of things in Eve, come down to the build-up of your leadership team. So their access to the members and how they want to interact, because I don't want to, shape people's leadership styles, but certainly coming up with a plan. So it is likely after the eviction, you've got a number of things stuck in the hole, be it freighters, be it DSTs or the like. So certainly coming up with a plan on how you're going to free up those assets. And then also you're probably going to end up with a number of people who are outside the hole. So coming up with a plan on how you're going to either integrate them into that escape or lifeboat saving plan, or indeed moving on. We've seen some groups that just move on even during the eviction and just start doing filament roams because they're just like, well, couldn't be bothered. We'll just continue moving on. But certainly that's an aspect. And unfortunately, I think it comes down to strong leadership, getting the direction to the members.
All right. And another question, and this one's from Julius Morden of Bob's Watch. He's asking, where would you rate the unattractiveness in the list of defensive measures to be taken against evictions, as in people who are going to evict you and gain nothing in return? I understand where Julius is coming from. He's asking, how do you make yourself attractive / unattractive for evictions?
Wow. So I think one of the presentations later on will talk a lot to this. But personally, there are 3 reasons that I think evictions occur. One is for content. So it's simply a case of, hey, we're coming in, fighters. If you don't fight us, we're taking everything type thing. That one there is simply whether or not you put up a good fight or if you roll over. I guess we'll see that piece. The next and probably most obvious one is the loot. So if you hold too much stuff in the hole, and there are ways of assessing how valuable a hole might be based on their membership, based on their doctrines, based on Z-kill, based on just watching them for an undisclosed period of time, but certainly the value of your members' personal assets. And then I would say the last reason is like an actual grudge or an emotional eviction. I've never really been involved in those sort of ones, but I mean, how do you make yourself not the target of someone in particular? I guess you're going to have to work out where you stand in the wormhole community and what it is you do to other groups.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Leo or Dormer of Ronins is asking, how do you keep up people's effort and energy level through a long eviction attempt or defense, especially when hold control is important?
Yeah. So I think having a strong leadership team that trust each other when the others aren't there is very important at that level, and that's certainly something that I have learnt over a long time, and made certainly some mistakes on trying to work too hard over the 4 days. And then I guess just knowing that you have people in different time zones to pick up things, and they don't have to necessarily be from those countries, right? Like you've got shift workers, you've got guys that work nights, but just knowing that and making sure people get rest is certainly really important. I mean, the way CCP has styled evictions, it is a 5 day affair from insertion to extraction, and it is possible to go without sleep for 5 days, but it's certainly not healthy for you or your life. And making sure you get away and do things, taking your kid to the pool or going for jogs and things like that is really important. I think time away from the screen will actually give you more energy during. And then the final bit is, particularly when nothing's going on, is having something people can do. So there's lots of third-party games you can play out there to certainly do.
Thank you very much. Sin, I'm going to ask one more question and I'm going to save the rest because there's lots of questions coming in, but we will get to those when perhaps we get to the panel section. So, one more question. This one is from Arcantos, and he's asking, what is your opinion on ransoms instead of outright evictions?
Yeah, so you have to know that the group's going to honor it, which is really important. And then like anything in Eve, if it's a large sum, maybe you use another third party, well-known player to leverage the deal. I've certainly been in the position where groups have sent me the money, I've held it, and then transferred it to the evictors once they leave. So I've certainly been in the position where it's worked. I personally don't like ransoms because Eve is a game of trust, and it's too easy to um, break that. But I have certainly been paid to leave holes. I've certainly been paid to stay in holes. And yeah, I mean, these are large sums, particularly when we're talking bigger groups that might drop quite a lot of cash. And my advice would be is if you are in a position where you think you're going to pay a ransom, paying it earlier is better. It is much easier on your members, on the other team's members, to just get it over and done with. If you're not going to pay, then yeah, sure.
Great. Thank you so much, Sin. I really appreciate it. And Sin is going to stick around for the panel at the end of this um, presentation section. For now, I want to move on to the second speaker. It's going to be Crizwoo. Let me just introduce him a little bit. Crizwoo is a member of Lazerhawks. He's also the leader of Ugandan Death Squad, a group, mercenary wormhole group that goes around evicting folks. And he's going to explain the reasons why in his own presentation. I don't want to get ahead of him. Just want to go over briefly. He used to be in the Mighty Beans. When I met him, we were going to go save a wormholer who lied to us about how many people he had to help defend his hole. So when we got there, found out instead of the 10 he promised, it was just him and maybe one other guy. So very disappointed about being lied to. We went ahead and left him and let him get evicted. But since then, I've known Crizwoo, and he's gone through Mighty Beans. He's now, I think he was in Novak at one point. Now he's in Lazerhawks. But I mostly know him right in these days as the leader of the Ugandan Death Squad. Crizwoo, please take it away from here.
All right. Is my presentation working okay? All right. Well, thank you for that introduction, Dark. And by the way, I think those people did eventually get evicted. Good riddance. I think they actually somehow managed to save themselves from that initial attempt.
Huh.
So, just let me know when the presentation is ready. All right. So, happiness is a successful eviction. Well, doesn't that sound like a New York Times bestseller self-help book? Well, that's sort of the meme, I guess. But before we dive into the presentation, let's talk a little bit about the goals. So first, I'd like to provide everyone with some insight into the Ugandan Death Squad, who we are, what we do, and why we do it. Then, God willing, if there are some uh, self-starters out there looking to sort of do something similar, maybe they'll find some nuggets of wisdom in my words, and it'll help them sort of structure their operations. And then finally, and this will become more thematically appropriate as the presentation goes on, we'll explain some of the social and therapeutic value of evicting. So let's start with what's unique about the UDS. First of all, we're not a corp. Um, and for us, that's has its advantages and its disadvantages. But one of the major pluses of that is that it's relatively low stress for everyone. We evict who we want when we want to, and it's a very good secondary source of content and occasionally income for all of us. Our members are scattered amongst several different corps, and they get all of their primary content from these corps, which is great. Everyone likes being a wormholer and getting good fights, so everyone has that source. And then finally, we mostly do small to mid-size evictions. This is sort of in contrary to like a corporation that might do an eviction. They'll usually be a much larger scale. They'll have, not only do they have more resources, more people, and they can ping and sort of make an op out of it, but also like they have bills to pay, so they have to hit larger targets, might put up more of a fight. Generally, the big landmark evictions are going to be done by, other members of this panel and not my group. So, starting from the beginning, we trace our roots back to the Mighty Beans, which was a C5 Pulsar organization. Um, it was very polarizing amongst the community. Some people loved us, some people hated us, but generally, amongst all the former Beans, it was remembered as some of the best of times, and we made a lot of really great friends. And we didn't take the game seriously. I had a great time. Unfortunately, the summer slump sort of led to a lot of internal collapse for the Beans, and it looked like it was going to be, a slow decline until the inevitable end. Sorry about that. Until the inevitable end in a whimper. But a sudden eviction attempt sort of saved us from a slow decline and brought it to a very quick end in a bang. The Beans scattered and sort of remained that way for a long time until eventually a group was formed. And this group didn't really have a purpose at all except for to organize joint ops among former Beans. And it had, no idea what those ops would be, and it sort of sat around and did nothing for a little while until eventually someone made a joke about evictions being cheaper than therapy and a general jaded perspective of the wormholes community. And we decided to dedicate ourselves to doing evictions. So how do we go about it? We do it the same way everyone else does, but I'll provide some small insight into, the nuances of our process. Starts with picking a target. Picking a target is sort of a democratic process. The core members, we have a channel. Everyone can pitch a target, and generally, when we find a target that everybody is happy with, we just go for it. Finding the target's usually pretty easy. Typically, whoever's pitching already has a seed, but because our members are so scattered across Wormhole Space Corps, everyone just checks their mapper from time to time, and if it's in chain, they pop a seed in, and then we go about our business. Infilling infrastructure. So this is something that historically we haven't done too much, but in the future and in more recent evictions we have done and will do more of. And I do strongly recommend preemptively infilling important infrastructure, especially rollers, just because infilling your structures, your main fleet, and your rollers all in one go can be quite difficult logistically if you're not super on the ball. And a lot of times, again, we're sort of casuals at this occasionally. Some of our guys live in C5s. And fives, they often have caps ready to seed if they roll into it preemptively. All good stuff to keep in mind when doing evictions in C5s. Executing. I don't want to talk too much about this because it's sort of the mechanics of it which, everyone, it's going to be kind of similar for everyone. But obviously, as Sin said, whole control is number one, and we treat it as such. No eviction can be successful without successful whole control. Organization and communication, kind of a particular challenge for us, getting everyone where they need to be when they need to be there, simply because we don't have like a corporate timer board and stuff. So usually it's a long string of pings. And then combat strategy, usually not that important. Honestly, we've only ever had any serious contest or serious attempt at a contest in 2 evictions, and I wouldn't really consider them that serious, I suppose. So how do we pick our targets? Obviously, loot is what we're after the most. And this is, it's not just like a flat number that you put on how much that you want and how you evaluate. There's a lot of means to evaluate it, but typically you want to look at how many mouths you have to feed versus how much loot that you get. A good eviction, I'd say, the average payout being like 7 billion, that's a good eviction. We've had our fair share of good evictions, really bad evictions, and, we've had some that were substantial. Contract work. This doesn't come around that often. One, we don't really have a storefront saying, hey, please pay us to do evictions. But also, two, when people do talk about it, I think people generally don't realize how expensive it actually is to, pay someone to go evict somebody for you, because, you have to give them a substantial sum of money to make it really worth it for them. So there's a lot of variables, and if someone asks about it, we can maybe talk about it more, but I don't really have time for it in my presentation as to how to determine prices. Settling scores. We've done this several times. There's one particularly treacherous snake that we have evicted twice already, and we'll probably evict him again. And then memes. I mean, our most recent eviction was literally just done for the potential Discord praise Bob salt that we would get, and we were not disappointed. So moving on. Have we been successful? Generally, I would say the answer to this would be yes by a lot of metrics. Certainly more successful than I or anyone else thought it was going to be. If anything, we sort of thought it might just be a flash in the pan. But, the first eviction, just 2 guys for a small contract for a friend. Objectively, didn't really deserve to be successful. We didn't do a lot of whole control. We just kind of got lucky and made off with a little bit of money. We've grown substantially in size and caliber. Evicting, I mean, I wouldn't say major wormhole corporations that, put up real fights with other corporations, but, some of the smaller, like Nano Boys we've evicted. Our most recent was the Feneki's eviction, which was the only eviction where we've actually had any sort of meaningful combat that ended in casualties on both sides. And the most obvious metric of our success, I suppose, would be that we've yet to fail an eviction. Now, notice it's in italics. I suspect if we keep going, especially at the rate that we've been going, eventually we'll probably fail an eviction. And as we continue to do these, they will probably get more difficult and more likely to fail. But the most important metric to us, at least, is that everyone has really enjoyed doing them. As I said, everyone that is in this group, we're all friends. We've been flying together for years, and we've picked up a few people, but generally people that we all like in our social dynamic. So what has made us successful? Well, first, piggybacking off what I just said, is unit cohesion. Generally, there's a great deal of trust among the core members, both in a trustworthiness aspect and in a trust and competence aspect. And because of this, because of this, evictions generally go off without a hitch. Everyone knows exactly what they need to do, and we trust everyone to keep the best interest of the eviction at heart. Everybody is capable of FCing. I mean, generally, we have a couple people, myself included, that will lead, but every single person in the core group has at some point or another led the operations within the eviction, simply because not everyone can be online all the time. Emphasis on multi-boxing. Really, if you want to do small to mid-sized evictions and you want it to actually be profitable, you have to do this. Everybody in the UDS runs at least 2. The average is probably 3 or 4 accounts, and these are all like alts during the eviction. And the rest of it, we have some guys that are major overachievers. We have one guy that has 7 accounts strictly dedicated to UDS operations, and he uses them for other stuff sometimes, but always having those 7 tunes there is really nice. Commitment to whole control. This is on a more sort of personal level for our membership. Not only is you have to have whole control to be successful in an eviction, but our members are committed to it on a personally. They clock lots of hours. I don't know why, but some of the guys seem to actually enjoy door stopping a wormhole, and so it always ends up working out for our whole control aspects. I mean, we do have some times where there are definitely skeleton crew hours, but for the most part, every single hole is door stopped 24/7. And even if we find a frig hole that is potentially controllable on the other side, we've had people literally make alpha alts and sigils to go door control, hole control a C1 that we were connected to through a frig hole. And then well-structured incentives. This is sort of an amplifier to all the other things. I mean, we have a proprietary sort of formula for who gets paid what. I'm sure lots of groups have thought of a formula similar in the past, but basically, your whole control hours, your door stopping hours, the amount of tunes you bring, and your investment generally adds up to what percentage of the payout is owed to you. And because we're not a corporation, we don't have bills, we pay out the entire loot haul to the membership. Challenges in the UDS. So scheduling, and really this should just be, the other end of the fact that our members are all in different corporations. Because every corporation has their own planned ops, sometimes it's very difficult to find a time that works for everyone. In our most recent eviction, one of our larger corporation, or one of the corporations that a large amount of our members are a part of, had an eviction going on at the same time, and as such, several of those guys weren't able to commit anything. And so we sort of ended up operating on a much smaller crew than we're used to, especially because a couple of those guys are like all-star hole controllers. And it does come with some other advantages though, like we keep our mains in home, so every now and then 2 corporations will roll into each other and people will just clock out and go log onto their mains, or if they need to pod out and go fight each other, come back and banter about it for an hour. Operational security is another issue. I mean, generally amongst the core members, there's a great deal of trust, and not above reproach, but for the most part, pretty close. We haven't had any major issues of operational security, but there's always, we need to be aware of the fact that everyone has, serious loyalties to their corporation, and be mindful of that when, telling people where to go, when to be there. And we also have a rule about conflicts of interest. People can duck out at any point if they have a conflict of interest. We won't ever ask anyone to go against their corporation. And generally, we try to avoid these types of evictions in the first place, which is the whole purpose of our picking the target process. So finally, we get to therapeutic value. 1, this isn't a substitute for actual self-care. If you need help, you need to get help. Evictions are a social experience. We have a great time, shoot the shit all day on comms. Oftentimes we play other games. One eviction we played RimWorld and made all the people on the eviction in the RimWorld and got up to all kinds of hijinks. We've tried several games of Endless Space 2, and everyone just generally enjoys being around each other and doing things together. Achieving the goal, this is, as the extent it can be fulfilling in a video game, it is as fulfilling as it could be in real life, just, hindered by the fact that it's a video game. But achieving a goal as a team, great feeling, especially when it's something like an eviction that makes a sort of semi-permanent impact on the landscape of wormhole space. And then catharsis, in a lot of ways, doing an eviction is like the punching your pillow or screaming into the dark of wormhole space. And I would also say that a successful eviction is its own reward. There's a pure and simple joy in successfully evicting somebody. So, in closing, because I think I've gone over my time a little bit, hopefully people took something out of this as to, why we do it, and some little nuggets of wisdom that might help you figure out how you might do something similar if that's something that interests you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Crizwoo. That was very insightful. We already have a couple of questions lined up for you.
Perfect.
Let me go over some. Rogue from Wormhole Society is asking, what is the easiest way to identify an eviction versus, say, a content Astra?
Well, I mean, my philosophy is that evictions aren't really for content. I know that's quite a bit different than the larger groups, but for us, evictions are for getting the job done. That's why you spend 95% of your time trying to not let there be content by keeping what's in the hole and what's out of the hole out of the hole. So I guess hole control would be the biggest thing. If they're letting you bring stuff in willy-nilly, they're letting you bring people in, then they probably don't actually care about whether or not they blow up your stuff.
Excellent, which is leads into another question about hole control and door stopping. Could you elaborate a little bit about the value of door stopping and holding hole control?
I mean, as I just said, when you're doing an eviction, you plan your eviction and the people you bring along with you such that you think you will be successful. If you don't control the hole, you give them an opportunity to bring outside variables into that equation. And then suddenly what you have isn't enough. And generally, you want to avoid that because, one, if you have to bring more people in, you have all kinds of questions like, oh, well, do we have to give them a share of the loot? So it's just easier to keep everything that's in the hole, and everything that's out of the hole, out of the hole. Without such, you never know. You might end up with 150 goon swarm jackdaws in your wormhole, and then what?
Makes sense. Clem Fandango of X Rodin is asking, do your primary corpse interests generally take priority over UDS ops in progress or schedule?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. I mean, take for example the last one. We had lots of guys that were doing their corpse eviction, and that was fine. I mean, kind of good on them because the last eviction didn't really have a lot of loot. It was funny though, and there was actually a lot of content. I mean, the last one we had like 4 to 5 hours of, maybe even 6 hours of on again, off again fighting people.
Nice. And then final question from Larynx is, how do you share loot if you need other groups to reinforce you?
So our philosophy has generally been the most important element to getting paid is putting in the time. So that's why, doing door stopping hours, it's very easy for someone who only brought 2 accounts to be the highest paid person of the eviction if they really put it. I mean, you have to put in a lot of time, but if you really put that time in, you're going to get rewarded for it. So I will say, as to bringing groups in that haven't done the time, we haven't really had to do that yet. We've never really been in a situation where we had to ping to like save an eviction. The closest would be maybe the Feneki's eviction, where there was like a 4 to like 6 guy jackdaw fleet that came in, but really that was more just coming in to like get on the kill mails and get some sweet frags because it was easy.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Crizwoo, for your presentation and for answering the questions. Uh, with that, Crizwoo will still be available for the panel discussion at the end of this show. Let me move on to a notorious person who's very well known for being perhaps one of the biggest boogeymans of Wormhole space with his Boogeyman Corporation, the CEO of Inner Hell, Adrameleth. Well, let me just first say thank you to Andre Afanador for getting me in touch with him. Andre and I have been in touch for a while, and he is friends with Max, Adrameleth, and he got me in touch with him. So, um, so Adrameleth is Russian. He can speak in English as well, but he prefers having a translator. So he has his friend Kate Thunderbolt, who's going to be acting as his translator. And with that, let me just turn it over to the CEO of Inner Hill, Adra. Take it away, and Kate.
Hello, guys.
Hi guys.
Oh, sorry for the last month. I have not have a single time free hour to prepare any presentation. I want to say a little about myself and history about Inner Hell and before Inner Hell. I live in Russia, in Chelyabinsk. I'm an ordinary guy who has a lot of work and little free time. I'm playing Kiev since 2010. My first corporation I created was a quantum explosion together with a syndicate of Dead and his fleetcom Higgs and team. We formed a Blood Union Alliance and we loved killing capitals in the space. We just routed holes, search any PvP. It was fun until CCP introduced first patch for kill life in the space. It was a very small collectives, not more than people in each corporation. But we already in the time kept everyone in fear with our log of traps and kill capitals and every day, every hour, in any time. Our first famous battle took place in July of 2013. We evicted the Space Alliance. It was very first major battle for us and first very big battle in the space history. It all ended after eviction of Trabirs Anonyms in September of 2015. After eviction of this corporation, my account and most account of my corporation was banned by CCP without any explanation. After a few months useless letters to CCP, I created new corporation in hell. I planned to play quietly, just kill crabs in the space as usual. But CCP nerf wormhole farming and we start looking for targets in nullsec space. Expectedly, we discovered a large number of capitals and supercapital ships that we can eat easily. That's because we have many experience, good scanning skills for catch them and kill them. But we had few people for most for any big battles, for kill any counter drops, defenders, etc. And we start friend with Alliance Outlaws. We start live together and fly together. Outlaws have people, we have our experience and some good people who can catch targets, have any logicist operation, etc. In September 2018, we and this alliance was evicted by Threat Nocts. After that, I decided to do a complete reboot for my corporation, its behavior and fundamentals. Therefore, that's an Hell corporation, which I know operate only at this time. I create new doctrines, expensive and effective. We start any active recruit policy, constant training of new pilots. You all know about our main doctrine Loki. They allowed to conduct alpha shooting against targets with many logistic setups. It's mobile. It's easy to end for nullifier transport, etc. The effectiveness of our formats was high before the nerf Loki by CCP. Most of collectives and EVE use them, start use them. I have no plans to revenge Hard Knocks or any other collectives. I always try to equal them, but to do something for overshadow them without any achievements. Our main idea became just burn everything and everyone that we will meet on our way. Everything I want. That's what we do begin. I began to spend all my free time in EVE, training pilots, find pilots, constant rolling of holes into nullsec with space, find something, catch something, kill. For several months we have recruited some people about 20 people. It's difficult to educate Russian people. They have no desire to do anything on their own. So I always had the brain on skeleton of our entire team. Perhaps someone can say we are bloggers, but we always had a few living people. I always played in 8.10 Windows of Eve. I was VC, Hunter, bonuses, Saber Palt, second Saber Palt, etc. Most of the player of my corporation playing 2-3 Windows and VF. Also, many of us, we are perfectly well coordinated team and a real fighting brotherhood. We made our first major eviction in summer of 2019. It was Mighty Bean. I just want to try it, our shield battleship format for our doctrine, and the choice follows them. They had a Pulsar and a lot of delicious ships. And then you already know relates, etc. As far as evictions are concerned, we never did it for money. I wanted was just to get a big fight or complete any goal, killing faction Fortizars, killing Capstar, or some collective in this space, which we hate with my people in corporation. All this accumulated by inhuman efforts to control the system, battle tactics, etc. I did not plan to do into details now. It's easy to answer the questions that are interesting to you. I want to add many of us were accused of espionage or foul play. I and my corporate members have never done this and did not use in there for evictions or for regular catching targets, capitals, super capitals. We always been against it. Only pure hunting and only if random. I think you can ask your questions. Kate will help me with translation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adra. So we have a couple of questions for you. Number one is from Twitch, actually. Wormhole Citizen wants to ask you, will you come back to the game and resurrect your corp?
I
Something here.
Okay. Now we have these plans only after if CCP makes do something, any big changes in EVE, maybe full rebalance of ships or create something new and big. Last years, if not have any evaluate and or any good ideas, it's not interested for me now, and I just because it don't want to play in EVE now.
Okay, so just so that I'm also clear, you're saying you're waiting for CCP to make some big changes to attract
Yeah.
you back to wormholes.
Yes, first changes since 2015, as I remember. They change capital carrier, they change the offline statistic of Wormhole, they do Kate, help me. Сделали разброс кораблей от Wormhole'ов и, собственно, там фрегатные дырки еще вели.
Well, freak-hole changes changed Adrameleth's mind about wormhole rolling and evicting.
Okay, so by that you mean the frigate hole changes, meaning that you cannot roll away frigate holes.
It's just one of the aspects.
It's one of the
Not
J-
dark part. Not most important. These free holes. With these free holes, any lives in hole don't want to do anything. Caribbeers stop caribbeer. Caribbeers very боялись.
I think Max want to say that when you have a freak hole which you cannot control, I mean close it or create it, instantly kill any life in this wormhole system, because when Joe Space was created, the main thing was that you can control your system, but when you cannot close the hole, you can't control it. So it changed mind of people who live in wormhole, as Max says.
Gotcha. Okay. I have another question from Lucas of Drunken Privateers. He's asking, do you feel like Inner Hell grew too big for its own good?
В общем, переросли Инерхилла себя.
Yes, it is because last time I cannot find any targets for us because many people afraid us. Don't try any aggressive to us. For our evictions, we evict many big collectives. But I don't want any middle collectives or small collectives because it's not interested for us, for me. And yes, we are own ourselves.
Agree with
All right, and so I know this is a question from me myself. Is that I know that Inner Hell used a lot of artillery ships, including artillery Lokis, to alpha off defenses. If someone was faced with those ships now, how would you counter them?
Переводи, Катя.
как контрить артилоки, спрашивают. Это же имба. В в текущих реалиях.
First, before nerf Loki, yes, it was Imba, but Imba when you have more than 30 Lokis. And for country, for control Lokis, it's какие-то расстояния, как перевести?
Distance.
Yes.
Скажи на русском, я переведу.
Контрируют Локи расстояние, соответственно, большей толстотой шипа, большим ЕХП или защитой определенных резистов. Это все легко.
Well, Max said that it's easy to counter Artilokis, and especially after CCP nerfed it. You just need to keep good distance against it, because now Artilokis have bad fall-off, and thus just keep good distance and just feed more HP to your ships.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. And Clem Fandango is asking, did the surgical strike nerf, or especially of Tech 3 cruisers, was that a factor in Inner Hell disbanding or becoming inactive?
В общем, спрашивают, мы дизманулись из-за того, что Локи понерфили из-за этого или из-за нет?
Not as I say, we just have not any targets, have no any idea, and if it was bad game for me now, not interested, just it. Not any nerf from CCP or other CCP actions, because we fly on other formats, not any Loki. Just
Well, Max said that nerfing something is not the reason. It's minor reason. The main reason that we didn't have enough content for us.
Yes.
to maintain our life in wormhole.
Okay, and here's another question I see from Vidu-san. He says, where do you see the space of where do you see wormhole space heading when you decide to leave? I think he's talking more about the politics and population of wormhole space when you were leaving. How do you see that happening?
Что будет с wormhole спейсом? Что ты думал, что будет с wormhole спейсом, когда уходил на покой, скажем так?
Все останется так, как есть. Потому что все привыкли жить так, как есть. А CCP ничего не меняет. Переводи.
Well, Max said that he thought that everything will stay the same because there is the same people, and CCP change makes little changes to wormhole space.
All right, and Jarvis from Farsi is asking, what would be one change to wormholes that would make you return? Or would it have to be a massive overhaul to wormholes in general?
Yes, I know. I answered before on it. Just need what CCP make many good changes for wormhole, for any balance. Do something new in this game. Maybe I return back.
I think it's clear.
I think, I think those are the questions I'm looking at here in Discord at least. With that, I just want to say thank you so much for your time, Adra. And I think we're going to go on to the panel discussion at this point, where we also have Braxxus, the CEO of Hard Knocks, who's going to be joining us in this discussion. I have a couple of questions that I've saved up, and I'm going to be picking those out, and hopefully a little bit from the Twitch channel as well. But with that, let me just go over to Braxxus a little bit. Braxxus, tell us a little bit about how you started or how Hard Knocks started, and where do you see Hard Knocks going with these upcoming changes with CCP?
Yeah, what's going on? I didn't start Hard Knocks, is probably the first thing to say, so I don't really know how it started, to be honest. But I joined HK in 2014, so 7 years ago now, getting bloody old. I moved to Wormholes in 2013, so almost 8 years in Wormholes now. And what was the other question, sorry? Yeah, just been in Wormholes the whole time, having fun.
Awesome. So there are some new changes that CCP's announced about how super capital stuff is going to be manufactured. Mm-hmm. Yeah. How do you see the impact on Wormhole space?
I don't know. I don't really want to. I feel like a lot of people have a tendency to like over exaggerate how bad it'll be. You know, I can say that a lot of people seem quite worried about it, right? People are worried about the rise in cost of stuff and how expensive stuff's going to be. Honestly, I'm just happy CCP is doing something. I'm just happy they're doing something. We'll see what happens, how it plays out, but I'm not particularly worried yet. I think if people are talking about dreads becoming 10 bill, that's obviously a bad thing if dreads get super expensive. If supers and titans get super expensive, not really a fan, but we'll see, right? I don't really like assuming too much until it's live. And to be honest, I suck at industry, so I don't really know.
So let me punt that question over to the rest of the panel. Let's go ahead and start with Sin as well. Sin, how do you see this this upcoming change affecting Wormhole space? Do you imagine there are going to be more folks to evict? Do you imagine that null bears are going to be moving in droves into Wormhole space, or not so much?
So we're definitely seeing nullsec orientated people moving into wormhole space, and I actually don't have an issue with people coming into wormhole space, but we're certainly them trying to bring their brand name into wormhole space, and that's not working out so well for them. Look, the slight change to the industry, which makes R4 moons more profitable, and I guess that low class gas is good. I don't think it's kicked the can far enough down the right direction. Like, we certainly need to see a bigger reason for people to do things other than just farm blue loot in wormhole space. But I guess I'm similar to Brax. Like, I read a lot of Reddit all the time. I read a lot of different Discords. I think it's a lot of the sky is falling. Like,
it's very negative. People are super negative all the time,
And it's the same with every big change CCP brings out. The negative comments come out early, and then all of a sudden, 3 months in, it's like, oh, okay, that wasn't so bad. Let's continue. So I think it'll be okay. But I do want to see more reasons for people to have a Rorqual mining in Wormhole space. I think that's a great content creator, and I'm worried that there's still not enough reason to bring that out.
Sounds great. Crizwoo, your thoughts? Same question.
Oh, sorry, my push to talk was the wrong button. Yeah, I think it's too early to say, really, but for the most part, more oracles is good, but less dreads is bad. I think the industry changes with the Marauder changes might change the ratting meta in an undesirable direction. It's too early to say, but I generally like having self-tackled dreads and sites that I can kill. I like having self-tackled rooks too. If we get more of those, then I guess I'm fine with it, but just got to see what happens.
Awesome. So, Adra, what are your thoughts? Do you think there's going to be some more folks moving in, giving you a little bit more few more targets to evict because of the changes coming up?
В общем, Макс, тебя спрашивают, будет ли для тебя интересное изменение системы с добычей ресурсов ВХ в плане появления новых целей ВХ? И, короче, имеет ли смысл для тебя возвращаться опять в игру, ролиться, ловить новые цели ВХ, которые, возможно, будут из-за этого патча?
Just simple. If people stay in wormhole space, will be new people in wormhole space, will carry beer, will live in wormhole space. Yes, I think yes. It's feel good for us.
All right, and here's a general question. I'm going to start back with Braxxus. Braxxus, now I know this is a context dependent, but maybe you could also provide us a context. How do you decide what kind of ships you want to bring in on, let's say, a vanilla hole, and you want to go evict them? Do you decide the kind of ships you're going to bring in based on what you expect the defenders to have, or do you kind of decide on some other factors? Give us shed some light on that.
Yeah, depends who you're evicting, right? Like if you're doing a little small eviction, who really cares? Just take in something. But if you're doing a big one like TSN, you obviously plan it quite carefully, depending on what the home defense is. So it just depends on who you're evicting.
All right. So we know that in the Wormhole meta, a lot of brawling compositions include Triglavian ships, for example, and some folks use them a lot for doing evictions as well. What's your take on Triglavian ships for eviction purposes?
Yeah, I think they're awesome. I think probably one of the better changes CCP has made in the past few years, to be honest, for wormholes. Leshaks, that sort of stuff are really awesome. Like Crizwoo talked about, right? You can multi-box a bunch of them and you can get a pretty small group of people multi-boxing and evict people with them. 2k DPS per shack, they can remote rep. Pretty decent near resistance with batteries in the mids. So yeah, they're an awesome change. They're cool.
Excellent. Sin, your take on the same?
I think they are overpowered in a number of ways. I wouldn't say like super duper, but certainly there needs to be a rebalance. Like I would love to have different options. Like the Nightmare, the Mercurial, the Rattlesnake. And T3s as well, right? Like T3 cruisers used to be a massive thing. At the moment now, there's almost one option, and that is Triglavians again. They're awesome. There, no dispute there. It's just a fact of like the price point for what they do is incredibly good.
I think the thing is, right, Leshaks aren't amazing for fighting. Like if you're taking a big fight in Leshaks, you're doing it wrong. Like Nightmares beat Leshaks, right? You can just outrange Leshaks and just beat Leshaks. Like Nightmares counter them essentially. So if you're taking Leshaks, you're not taking Leshaks into a massive thing. Like if we took Leshaks into TDC and we would have fed 100 Leshaks, right? It's not really a fighting comp. It's more like an AFK bash event, like the stuff Crizwoo does.
Yeah, I mean, like we fly Ickies, and literally the reason we fly them is specifically to avoid fighting. They're mobile and they can do a lot of damage, and we don't always have the numbers to like bring a real fighting comp and still like do it quickly. So we fly Ickies. I mean, the perfect example of when that worked out for us is at the start of the digital chess eviction. We were hitting their shield timer, and for some reason they undocked like 7 Haw Phoenixes and like a bunch of other stuff and just warped it at us, and we just flew away. and then immediately started rage pinging, and then they smartly realized, okay, we're not going to actually push them off, so let's stock everything up before they bring the boys in.
Excellent. Adra, I don't know if you were still around when CCP introduced triglavians. I think you were. What was your take on those?
Какие твои мысли про введение трикласских кораблей, Макс?
It's just very interesting and most cool for if, but need more changes. not only ships need to change all politic and of CCP to game.
Excellent. So, folks, here's another question I see in our Discord. How can a corp work to prevent being evicted before they are on the radar? What actions should or should they not take to effect a meaningful defense before the fact? What are a couple of the biggest factors that get them on the radar? Let's start with Braxxus.
I'm sorry, I was barely listening. What was the question? How to not get evicted or something?
Yeah, so essentially, what are the things that you need to do to not get on the radar, and what are the factors that put you on the radar?
I guess it just depends on who is potentially evicting you, right? Like Crizwoo said, for them it's loot. All they care about is loot. But if a group like HK or Lazerhawk comes for you, it's probably not for loot, it's for big fights. So we don't really do super small ones as a corp. So yeah, for us it's just fights really, for big, huge evictions. But I guess loot is a huge thing for the smaller ones, right? Triple rig, 4 desires, that sort of stuff.
Yes. And cores have actually turned out to be a pretty good source of loot.
Excellent. So essentially, keep your loot down. Don't
if
triple rigs.
Loot down, the best thing you can do is flip your structure.
Yeah.
It is possible to tell how old a structure is, and people look at that.
Yeah, and just so that everyone's aware, flipping a structure basically means unanchor your structure, pick up all the loot that falls out, and then re-anchor it so that you're not a loot pinata. All right, here's another question. This one is from Leo Dormer from Ronin 1. What's the likelihood that Wormhole Corps can evict null alliances from Wormhole space without being counter-targeted? Does the threat of counter-eviction, now that Wormhole space will have a strategic value, make you hesitate to consider evicting null alliances and their farmholds? Start with Braxxus.
Just do it. Just do it. Don't build a bitch. Just do it.
I suspect if someone tried to counter-evict HK, it would be very much like the last time that happened.
Yeah, that's right.
All their stuff in their suitcases.
I think I'm pretty used to it by now. I didn't mean that in a mean way, by the way. Obviously, just do it. If you want to do it, do it. I don't think null people care enough, right? I really don't think null cares enough about small wormhole corps. They cared about HK because we had 2 keep stars a few years ago, but they don't care about anyone else in wormholes. No one's going to counter evict you for hitting some farm. Just do
it. Sin, what do you think?
So wormhole space is a different style of play. It's not for everyone. So I have seen many people come in and realize that it's just not their style, and they go back to null. And there's no issue with that, right? My style of play is not null. I don't care for it. It doesn't really interest me. So yeah, if wormhole space interests you, come on in, give it a go. I guess the original question is, if a brand name nullsec sets up a farm hole in wormhole space, which is certainly happening and has been happening for a while. I don't really fear farm holes don't have a lot of ISK. They're unlikely to get fights, so the only reason you go push them over is to take it as a farm hole yourself, right? But I don't think, if you do that, you're in danger of them then going to come in and evict you. And at the same deal, if they're going to bring in multiple 250-man fleets, then sure, there's probably going to be one, if any, fight, and then that's it, right? Cool. But hull control is very different to null warfare. So maybe, unless they've got competent wormhole experienced FCs, it's going to be a fucking dick drag for their members.
Makes sense. And let me go over some of the questions that I had saved. So you all have various experiences doing evictions for small or large corporations, or just doing it for fights. If you were to give just a few sentences to small corporations to basically avoid getting evicted, what would that be? Starting with let's stay with Sin.
So, live inside your means. When I started in Wormhole Space, I had my own little co-op. It was me and a couple of guys. We lived out of a pos. This is before Citadels. Cool. It was all good, and I'm pretty confident we lived within our means. We were scared of anything that freaking moved, though. I then, when Citadels came out, went and plonked a Fortizar down. Zero need for me to have done that, right? But back in the day when Fortizars were quite new, that certainly elevated the risk of me and my mates getting pushed out, and I probably didn't realize that. You do see that a lot where people come into wormholes and they want to do indie in wormholes, which there's no issue with, but they then go and put down a large structure, they rig it with T2 rigs, and then they've just got no capacity, and they put tens of billions of whatever it is, maybe it's reactions, maybe it's their rock walls or whatever inside these things, and they don't realize that they've now elevated themselves to a point where someone might want to do a log off trap, someone might want to, but at the end of the day, right, like, if that's the way you want to play, it's your game, so come on down. I don't really do it for emotional or grudges or anything like that, so I guess some groups do, so, but if you're a small group and you want to come into Wormhole Space, you're probably fine, just don't live outside your means, and it's one of the Eve rules, right, like, don't fly what you can't afford to lose, so if you're going to come into Wormhole Space, just bring in what, if it does get destroyed, then cool, but just be in a position where you can continue on.
Excellent. Adra, what would you recommend a small corporation to do if a large wormhole corporation or entities shows up to evict them for some reason?
Макс, твой совет маленькой корпорации, если приехал блок их выселять? Что им делать?
Small corporation not have many assets or another any targets what they will evicted. Just save your assets and ISK and HiSec and take in the space not money which you don't want lose. Ну, Кит, если я неправильно сказал, переведи, что...
Long story short, first one, don't stockpile your assets in wormhole space and keep it in gas space. And usually small corporations are not evicted with big corporations because big corporations are not interested in evicting small groups. Usually.
Actually, that fits in perfectly with the next question that I have, and this one's directed for Crizwoo first. What is your take on filamenting out with your smaller hauler, non-freighter haulers, when you are being evicted? Is that a good strategy, viable strategy, and how do you feel about it as the evictor?
The current filament setup is an utterly game-breaking mechanic. It is, I would call it an exploit, even though it's totally legit within the game mechanics. Postman filaments are plus frig holes equals unlimited license to get whatever you want out of your wormhole. They're too safe, and quite honestly, they need to be changed. That is my entire take on filaments. I'm sure Braxxus can talk all about Postman filaments.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know much about them these days, just a little bit disconnected. But yeah, if anyone from CCP is listening, it seems very broken. It's got to get fixed, right? It seems like people who do evictions more than me these days seem to getting fucked by it. So it seems like a pretty simple change, just don't make them usable in wormholes.
Yeah, and it increases the risk aversion. Like, if you give people an out like this, then there's no reason for them to think of actual counterable ways to either get out if that's what they want to do or fight. Like, it's just like, well, yeet out, get a scepter, drive back in. Yeet out again, get a scepter, drive back in. It needs a way that it's counterable, and then that's everything Eve should be, right? The greater the risk reward, everything should be counterable. And at the moment, there's no counterplay to it. You warp to a safe, you yeet out, like within seconds.
Yeah.
Well, there's also not really a ton of counterplay to frig holes either, but
sure.
Here we are. Look, it's liquid holes, and you can get. HK did an eviction where they got tons of stuff out. I don't know exactly how much, but from what I heard, it was probably more than they got out of the total loot.
Yeah, those good boys ended up doing a lot of filamenting. And then you step it back in through the frig hole, right? You filament out, step back in through a frig hole, do it again.
And there's no way to even catch them while they're filamenting if they have half of a brain. That's all it takes.
Yeah.
All right, and I think this is a good question. There's been some discussion about it in Discord as well. Crizwoo said that there is a way to know how old a structure is. The person who's asking this is Guz from Ronin. He's asking, I've never heard of that. Could you elaborate a little bit on how you would tell?
I would love to elaborate, but I can't. Not because I'm keeping it secret, but because I'm not the one who figures out how old the structures are. So I don't know how to.
Okay.
So I can talk a
Go
bit
ahead.
about it if you want.
Yes, please.
So, I mean, the old school way is you set a seed in a hole, right, and you build spreadsheets, or even you just, when you're kicking around Wormhole space, you build them and you write down all the structure names. Sure, that's one way. Every structure has a unique tag identification number that you can grab, and they're sequential. So every structure from a mobile depot all the way through to keep stars when they're dropped have a unique number. They're all sequential. So if you were to drop your own mobile depot every week and record that number, you would be able to get a timestamp of when you've dropped it. And then as you're recording other unique structures in Wormhole space, so other people's Astros, Vortizars, you can plug them into your spreadsheet, and that'll give you a timestamp of roughly when that structure was anchored. So if people are flipping them, you're able to see if they're not or they are and how long.
That is actually brilliant. So how do you get this number?
So you pretty much drag it into a chat window, the structure itself, copy paste and put it into a Word document, and you'll get the unique code.
That's brilliant. So this is something I didn't know about as well. Folks, let me just repeat this because that's pretty delicious information. So every structure has a unique number and that is sequential. And if you have a spreadsheet, for example, you put a mobile depot down, you can kind of track how long the structure has been on by basically counting the sequences that have gone on. And you can do that by dragging the structure down into your chat, and then from there, copy pasting it into Word document. Thank you very much for this insight. That's actually brilliant. So, how many of our eviction crew panel here knew about this? I didn't know about this.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Okay, all right. So, folks, I think that pretty much wraps up most of the questions that I had up here. If anyone else has any questions, I'm going to give you guys a couple more minute or so to go ahead and ask them, including in Twitch. If you folks are listening in Twitch, please go ahead and ask those questions, and I will go ahead and ask our panel. From Twitch, Braxxus, do you agree that Wormhole Space was made to be oriented on less scale collectives than in nullsec? Because no supers and wormhole mass limits, etc. Maybe the reason for all of the wormhole problems nowadays is only because of those blue coalitions and agreements between the biggest whales.
Coalitions, exactly. What? Like, I think the big problem is just currently PVA in wormholes is the biggest problem. I don't know if anyone here would agree with me or not, but I think it's probably good to talk about. I think PVA changes are really needed in wormholes. I think the whole current subcap kind of meta with Lashaks is the biggest problem. Yeah. If anyone from CCP is listening or anyone, I think everyone at Wormholes, no matter what group you're from, whether it's a small little group or a large group like HK, people want changes to PVA. Currently people 10 boxing, 20 boxing Lashaks, one Chinese guy or something like that, making a lot of money, one Russian guy, all these kind of little groups. It's very broken, and it makes it look like Wormholes make a lot of money and a lot more than null, and in reality it's these people coming in doing this sort of thing and you can't catch them, right? It's very crappy content-wise.
And what's frustrating is the ES doesn't get recycled in wormholes, so that guy makes all the ES, and I have no flipping idea where that goes. But it's certainly not going into fights in wormholes.
And literally the moment a new sig, they just immediately know and they're gone.
I'm going to scratch that a little bit so that we can get more a little bit more deeper in that. So elaborate on that, folks. What do you mean that what's going on? Give us an example of the issue, and what can CCP do to solve it?
So the most recent PVA change was 2016 in wormholes, right? It was the big change in 2016 where the new anomalies were rebalanced. The old escalation system was pretty broken. I don't want to go into it too much, but back in 2016 it was pretty broken, so there was a change needed. CCP made a change. The current sites have been the same since 2016, I think, right? So it's been 5 years now. I think it was actually mid-2016, so probably getting close to exactly 5 years now. And the problem with them is you can do them in subgaps, and then when Lashaks are released and all that sort of stuff, it's very, very easy to multi-box them, easy to make a lot of money doing it. And I think everyone has noticed, every wormhole group, whether big or small, has noticed a lot of people from null coming into wormholes, and then wormhole people as well doing it, and then just, making a lot of money. There's people multi-boxing a couple of accounts, making a hell of a lot of money doing it, and it's not good for content. I think most people would prefer to see capitals in sight. I think I've always believed that it should be capital-oriented PVA in wormholes and high-class space, not sub-cap-oriented. I think you should put risk on grid and caps.
Yeah, I think that's going to have to be changed too, eventually.
I think it's the number one quality of life change for wormholes, right? Make some PvE changes, doesn't involve slashing the amount of money you make. Just make changes to the science to force people to put capitals on grid, encourage capital usage, I mean, Max just said it himself. Compared to when he was hunting and doing log-off traps in 2015, 2016, there are far less capitals out. There's far less incentive to use capitals. You got to make people use caps more. Not 20 or shacks boxed by one guy who's an Xboxer.
All right, and so I guess what feeds into that is the recent changes to Marauders also have only exacerbated the issue. I'm guessing.
I don't know if that's necessarily true.
Yeah.
I don't mind. Like they're fixed on grid, right? Like they go into the side, they've got their little 30-second thing. They can't MJD out because they're tackled anyway, right? It's these big groups where the rats all point one chip. So as soon as you enter, if you're rage rolling or if you have a back door to their hole and you jump in, there's just far too many options for them to leave. But naturally, the worst case for them is they MJD, leaving one chip tackled. They then warp to a safe. The new fleet. Warping, what's it called? Fleet formations. He can then warp 50 k's out. So even if you get a combat probe, you warp the Saber, you might not even get the one that's slowest to warp. They bounce around for 15 minutes, they regroup, and they just yeet out with the filaments. There's far too many options for that person to run 15 accounts, 20 accounts, and just disappear whenever they feel like it.
I think everyone's just saying, well, like the one takeaway is wormholes are too safe right now. It's too safe to make big money with these Lashak blobs, right? It's got to be more dangerous. Not just like, a typical solution, just slash the money you make, right? If you see wormholes are making too much money, just slash the blue loot. Obviously the wrong solution. You want to promote content, you don't want to make people log off and quit by slashing the money they make. Make the sites, make changes, right?
Yeah, and if you slash the money, then all the dreads that we do occasionally get to kill, those are all going to just go away. No one's going to...
Yeah, it's going to go, yep.
Then Wormhole Space will truly be dead.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. And here's a question for myself. Now y'all are all professional evictors, quote unquote. Have you seen the number of, let's say, deep wormhole corps, folks who live with two statics, like C4, C2s, etc. Have you seen the number of those corps living there that are viable targets? As Max was saying, has gone down. Is that also everyone else's perspective, that there are fewer people living in wormholes right now than, let's say, a couple of years ago?
I don't know about that. I don't think so, to be honest. I think it's just always a cycle, right? It's been 8 years now, and 8 years ago, for me, people were saying wormholes are dead in 2013. I don't think wormholes are dead. I think it's fine. There's up and down cycles based on so many different factors, but there's always plenty of groups, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's plenty of people. If you're asking the question of eviction, there's plenty of people to evict. That's not an issue. I don't think they're going down. I certainly have seen less one-man corpse in those low class. Maybe that's what you're hinting towards, but no, I think there's still people out there. We're still running into people.
And I'll say most of my evictions have been C4s. As a pain in the ass as it is to have to doorstop two holes, most of my evictions are C4s just because, I don't know, there's a lot of corps that make nice juicy targets, or there's people that we've had beef with or whatever that have lived in C4s. I will say I generally prefer to, evict holes that only have one static, but...
I just want to say, by the way, someone said it in chat, Leo Dormer, it's a really good point. He said, what about removing Avengers or making them worth more in the PvE sites? And it's exactly what everyone said back in 2016 for the PvE changes. Just make Avengers worth more. So if you put capitals on grid, you get more incentive. Move some blue loot into the Avengers instead of the site, right? So you can still do them in subcaps if you want to do them, and you're not a big multi-boxer. You're someone who's doing it with a corp for fun, socially. You can still do it, but you make less. You want to make more money, you put capitals on grid, you siege them, you triage them. Yep. Easy. A simple change, right? To move some blue loot into the Avengers. Can't the Avengers drop, 15 mil each? 5 mil each?
It's irrelevant,
crap.
Yeah.
It's disgusting. It's been like this for 5 years. Come on, it's a number change. Just do it.
Makes sense. So here's another question, and this is a bit of a tongue-in-cheek, but it's serious. I'm sure some of you all are familiar with the EOS man. There's one person who multi-boxes a whole bunch of EOSs. I don't know if everyone here has come across them, but if someone could please take some time to explain what this person does and how do you counter them.
EOS man. There's lots of different setups, but I think the specific one people are talking to is it's a large quantity of EOSs. I think it's like 10 maybe. It's 3 Pontifexes, and I think it's a Devoter, right? So he's got the bubble around him. He can drop his sentries. He can then micro command. What's it called? Fucking command desi.
Boosh.
Yeah. Boosh. Yeah. Boosh 100 k's away. Shoot you with his sentries, and anytime you try to warp, you get caught in the bubble. And he can just do that. And once he's bored, he can leave.
It's very inventive. It's very cool.
Yeah.
It's a very cool thing. Good on him.
Yep, I agree. Good on him.
Is he a menace? Sure, but it's entertaining.
Yeah, and it's not like it's like so OP everyone's doing it. And he tends to be in a C6 Magnetar, so the alpha of those sentries is painful.
Yes.
Excellent. Yes, we've all heard about the ES Man, and I think I've seen some setups in Nullsec as well, where they bring in a whole bunch of dummies controlled by one rapier, or their drones are at least controlled by one rapier with insta-locking ability to alpha folks off who are attacking miners. So yeah, that strategy is pretty successful.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason you can't do it with dummies either. Hell, I've even talked about maybe doing something like that.
But honestly, it's these other ones that just aren't even interested in a fight. At least he will actually sit there and fight until he runs out of sentries. The other groups, they will just disappear at the slightest whiff of a scout getting eyes on them.
Now, here's another question from Rogue from Wormhole Society. She's asking, can you explain the issues of the Blue Donut and J-Space, and maybe how the general culture in Wormhole Space leads to frenemies?
I don't understand the question.
So I can speak to the Blue Donut stuff because I think it's obviously referring to HK and Lazerhawks. We've been friends with Lazerhawks now for 8 years. It's a long time, honestly. I think it's probably getting to be one of the older relationships in the game in terms of two groups. I think it's pretty special. 8 years is a bloody long time. 7-8 years since the start of 2014. So we work together not to be some huge big blob, but because we've been friends for a very, very, very long time, and we love working with each other.
I would probably also say that you see less of the Blue Donut, which is obviously an LSEC reference in J-Space than you do in LSEC or HiSec. I mean,
HK and Lazerhawks are not exactly that big, Don't put extreme fleet numbers in. We're not exactly, putting 500 in fleet.
And I think I have one question for Max. Max, you were able to gather together a whole bunch of Russians who were able to fly together and listen to your commands. How did you achieve that? Because a lot of times gathering so many people in Eve is like herding cats. So what was the key to your success of commanding so many people at the same time?
Кейт, переведи, пожалуйста.
Как тебе удалось собрать такой большой коллектив русскоязычных игроков и вести их к своей цели, скажем так?
For first, all people in my corporation, it's come for our corporation only for fly with me, with us. Just only after our rebranding, which was be after Hard Knock Eviction of and us. For another collectives, we fly only with Duckling Union and Timecrete Alliance. All simple people from these alliances, from Timecrete and from Duckling Union, was be by alt account in my corporation too, because was a good relationship with these alliances with us. But I never want to fly with any another Russian alliance. We try to first fly with Parabellum, but they not be interested for us. They won't do any catch good targets and do something big. And all.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm gonna end this with one last question. I think that's for all of you. So we're gonna start with Braxxus on this. If CCP, other than the changes that we've already talked about that you all want to see them make, if there was a niche ship that they could, a ship that could fill in some sort of niche, what would that be? And can you give us some ideas about what your thoughts would be? Some creative ideas that you may have had already.
Oh, jeez. I'm the least creative person ever, so I don't know. Anyone else got any ideas? Because I don't. The changes I want to see, I don't want to harp on about it, but it's really just PvE changes, right? There are so many little small changes like that you can make to wormholes that would improve the quality of life for everyone, for thousands of people, an incredible amount. Small little changes, just spend some time on it, a couple of weeks, bang it out, please.
Oh,
I don't know about
T3, T3 cruisers, I think, are in dire need of a relook. Like, do we need to lose skill points anymore? I'm not convinced we do. And maybe if you had a bunch of preset fits and you could switch between them, like your T3 destroyers, that'd be pretty sweet. Like, it's just such a pain in the ass having to drag the new rigs and subsystems around. Like, maybe if you all had them on, you could do that. Yeah.
Yeah, T3 buffs would be cool, I think. Buff T3s.
Buff Crizwoo.
I mean, the Red Dream is a ship that can roll frig holes, right? But in lieu of that, I think it'd be really nice because one of the most hypothesized solutions to frig holes, which is utterly impractical, but it's kind of a cool idea, is the lightning rod theory. And the lightning rod theory is that you get a Hictor, and then you get a bunch of Edencom ships, and as the Scepters come in, you just zap them. This is one, Scepters have too much EHP for that to work, unless you have like a bunch of people. And then two, even then they still align like so fast and warp so fast. So I think it'd be really cool if we had a ship that could somehow in a short area affect other ships' align times, so that frig holes weren't such a free license to just infill people.
I don't like that you can't roll them and they're there for 16 hours. I actually don't mind that they're an opportunity in time for someone to do something. It just, if they're going to be there for 16 hours, the gameplay should allow you to close it, whoever's got control. I don't care if it's the defender or the attacker. Or if you're going to make them unrollable, then have them like a limited opportunity. Like you shouldn't force people to play a game for 16 hours straight just because there's a fucking freak hole there. Like, that's my opinion. Like, pardon me for swearing, but yeah.
This is something that Laura Sucker has said in the past, is that frig holes aren't even like a reliable advantage for defenders. Like, if you think defenders need an advantage, and they do, like from a fairness perspective, defenders should always be at an advantage because they're defending, they've had time to fortify. Like, give them something more reliable that they can actually use instead of just relying on random chance.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that. It is harder at the moment to be the defender. Like, it's not impossible at all, but it's certainly harder.
Excellent. And the person who asked that question wants me to let you know it was Sharo Hakari who wanted that question answered. All right, so folks, thank you so much for your time, panel. Braxxus, Sin, Crizwoo, Adra, and Kate for translating. Y'all have been great. Tiberius for producing the show and broadcasting it to Talking Stations, and to the folks at Talking Stations who made it such a great success. CCP Aurora for tweeting out our show. Really appreciate your time, and I hope everybody got some good insights out of this. And hopefully we may have more episodes of Jove Talks in the future. Thank you so much, folks, and hope to see you all more on Jove Talks.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right.